nero backe opp, tåga vi samlar rock, hejsan pojkar.
Hello and welcome to today's Battletech review. Today we're going to be looking at the Grizzly, which I already talked about at least in passing while looking at the Kodiak a while back now. The Grizzly is a decent enough machine once the kinks are ironed out of it. It's not meant to replace anything. It's not meant to be the top of the line machine, but as a trooper, it does remarkably well. It's not an omnimech. It's a very standard kind of machine. It has a lot of limitations that we're going to go over, and that might very well be why it had a limited penetration in the market. We'll go with that. We've been seeing a decent number of them here in R-True recently, mostly because Phi Galaxy has brought a bunch for repair after their fighting around Terra. We're quite happy to work on these nowadays, but some of the more original models, if they bring them in, we have a bit more problems with. So let's talk about the Grizzly. Land scientists really love to try to build things that they call Totem Mechs for their warriors to fight in. You will see those quite frequently throughout history, but more recently, especially in this later part of the 32nd century, you've got some people making all sorts of things that are, well, very topical, but get silly at times. The idea of a totem mech is to have a machine that represents your clan and represents your people, but sometimes they do go overboard. Nowadays, we've got things like the Werewolf here in the middle, or the Jade Phoenix, and the Balius, and all sorts of different things. And sometimes they just go a little bit too overboard. I don't like the Balius's look. While it does look like a horse mixed with a dog, it just doesn't quite work for me. The Werewolf is more functional, but it could have gone with a more basic setup for the equipment, because that kind of shape sometimes makes it hard to repair. I've never really had to touch a Jade Phoenix. Those things are magical to the people of the Jade Falcon, but still, totems are all around. And we come to the start of the history of the Grizzly. The last clan to acquire Omnimech technology was Clan Ghostbear, which was a surprise to many people nowadays, seeing how dominant they are in the Inner Sphere. They were also one of the clans that was begging for a good totem mech, while their Toman was built around a lot of SLDF mech and modernization to C designs. Their limitations on industrial power and scientific ability limited what they were able to do as well, so they went with something a little bit more simple for one of their first big totem mech. So they've decided to build the Grizzly in 2947. The problem came really when you start looking at what was coming out and what was available at the time. The Timberwolf dropped about 2 years earlier, and it is a mech that is still beloved by a whole lot of people. The Summoner had been around for about half a century. The Stormcrow had been put in production by the Snow Raven about 17 years before, while it was actually Clan Ghostbear who got the plans of the Corvus that turned into the Stormcrow later on. So this one here was a very basic machine. It was not built as an omnimech. It wasn't fully understood yet how to properly make a machine using that technology. And Clan Ghostbear at the time was quite slow to move. They weren't the massive industrial powerhouse that we know them as in the Rassilake Dominion nowadays. The Grizzly is really based off what Clan Ghostbear knew from previous standard machines. You could say that it really is inspired by the Guillotine 2C and the regular Guillotine as well. The body is made of endo steel to save on weight, which is fairly standard at the time, while the body is covered with 13 tons of standard plates. You get a fairly standard 280 engine to propel it about 464 kilometers per hour in a straight line, but the mobility is improved with a set of jump jet, allowing you to move 120 meters in the air, once again quite comparable to that old SLDF Guillotine. It's not as fast as, let's say, a Timberwolf, but it's fast enough to get into it with most other 70-ton machine in this same range, which is standard machines built in the 30th century. If you brought that into the inner sphere at the time it was originally built, it would have been a monster. In clan space, it was just another 70-ton standard mech. The original Grizzly was meant to be an all-around trooper, and it was meant to be able to compete with other mechs in its category rather than the more specialized Omnimex. It has two main guns, a big Gauss rifle felled by 2 tons of melon balls, and a large pulse laser, giving you a very decent range, destructive potential, and accuracy when things get a little bit closer. When things get even closer, you get a medium pulse laser and a small pulse laser, giving you bracket range on your energy weapon and fairly decent anti-infantry potential. You even get a 10 rack of LRM in the shoulder in order to do some indirect fire, which is a very nice thing to add on the whole design. The problem is, it's not an Omnimech. Basically, you can't switch those weapons around like you want, and this was now a fairly common and popular thing to do amongst clan warriors. There were quite a few little issues with the Grizzly when it came out, the main one being that it wasn't an Omnimech in a world where the Omnimech was now taking all the frontline roles. The other problem is what actually probably killed the darn Grizzly. It became a hangar queen. Techs had to spend double to triple the time that they would need to fix it compared to regular mechs. And then when you add to it that it's not an Omnimech, well, that's closer to 4 to 5 times the work you would have to put into a summoner in order to refit it. The actuators were rather terrible. They were quite easy to damage using infantry units. So elementals that were now getting ubiquitous could easily disable a Grizzly. Myomer bundles on the darn thing were also not that great and were easily getting cut by armor plates moving around. All things considered, the Grizzly was not going to cut it. So the Grizzly was really not very popular. Unlike many other designs at the time, it was never traded or stolen by the other clans. It really remained in the hands of Clan Ghostbear. They stopped production in 3013, with all the remaining machines basically being moved to provisional clusters and Solama units, sometimes being used as a trainer as well. And during Operation Revival, there was a handful of them in Clan Ghostbear's Tomon on the front lines, but they never were prevalent enough that the Inner Sphere actually decided to give it a nickname. It was just the Grizzly, and I think Comstar actually knew it as the Grizzly, with their people working with the clans. There did come a time where the Grizzly came back into existence. Star Captain Scott used a Grizzly during the Combine Ghostbear War with a particular setup, which became popular over time. This one is actually meant to be a sniper infantry hunter, which sounds like a weird combo, but it kind of works. And it doesn't have any of the base issues of the Grizzly being fixed, so it's still a hangar queen. The main guns are switched up a bit. You still have that Gauss rifle because it's quite efficient in the clan setup, but it's now supported by an ER large laser, giving you a better overall range. So that's where the sniper portion comes in. At closer range, you get 6 ER micro laser for a barrage of laser fire against infantry. And this is against the standard infantry. Against battle armors, it's not going to be as efficient, but you're still going to be able to deal a decent amount of damage. The shoulder launcher is replaced with an ATM-9 with 2 tons of ammo, so you can't fit all 3 types. But a lot of times those were just loaded with eye explosive because this one was really meant to be used in urban brawling, in urban fights. I do think it's one of the fun design. It has a variety of roles. 6 ER micro laser might not sound like a lot, but once you get behind someone by jumping, it will do a big chunk of damage. It might not be as accurate as the original Grizzly, but it's still quite decent. If you manage to get one of the more modern ones where those standard issues of the being a hangar queen gets fixed, I think it can fit that sniper infantry hunter role fairly well. And that's basically what stuck around. It took a really long time for a minor company in the Rafeelia Dominion, Jothan Battleworks, to give a license to the Grizzly and start producing a Mark III in 3138. This is the one that we sometimes call the Goito Grizzly, because that's where it comes from. The design is modernized, the actuators are not as problematic, things is streamlined, the body kit has a slight upgrade to make sure that the plates don't cut into my armor anymore. You probably won't be needing to work on it as much as the one before. Totem Battleworks' goal, though, was not to just build new Grizzly, but to get experience as a battle mech construction company and get contracts in order to keep production going and new mechs on the market. The biggest difference, however, between the two models is that in these models, the chassis is now reinforced rather than made out of endo steel, making it much tougher and much harder to break down. I usually don't like working on reinforced chassis because, well, it's often enough very difficult to work with. But this one here actually made the Grizzly tough enough that it's not going to require a whole lot of work most of the time. In order to make room for that, though, they had to replace the engine with a 280 XL, saving a good chunk of weight, but, making it a little bit more risky. With a reinforced structure, though, it's not that bad. All lasers come from the original, but they are now replaced with ERs, so you got an ER large, an ER small, and an ER medium laser. And your 10 rack of LRM is now tied to an Artemis 5 system, giving you both increased clustering and accuracy. The ammo on this is protected by Case 2. Your big gun is replaced with a standard plasma rifle with 2 tons of reload, allowing you to cook people alive. The direct fire weapons are tied to a targeting computer for increased accuracy, so this mech is incredibly accurate even though it doesn't use any pulse lasers. It is interesting to know, though, that this was not the last of the Goito Grizzlies. There is one that I just want to talk about real quick. I know I kept you waiting, but here it is, the famous Inner Sphere Special Grizzly. This thing has been coming out of factories in the Rafeelia Dominion. I don't know which one, I don't know where, but it is rather special. It's fairly straightforward. It's mainly using Inner Sphere technologies, double heat sinks, Inner Sphere light ferrofibrous for the armor. It is fairly simple overall. Uses an Inner Sphere XL engine, which is always fairly risky, but it's what they had on hands, I suppose. The only fancy-ish bit is that Inner Sphere, that clan grade endo steel chassis, which is basically the standard Grizzly, rather than that more modern Goito version. As a mech, it has a maximum armor for a mech its size, which is very nice. And compared to the standard Grizzly, it uses the Orion's targeting computer, so it's actually very good at taking down aircrafts. It is a modern Grizzly, so it has far less issues with the actuators and the maintenance on it as well. So it is a fairly decent 70-tonner. As far as equipment goes, it's rather straightforward. It's not a perfect rebuild of a Grizzly, but you got X-pulse lasers instead of the pulse lasers, so you do get decent enough range on most of those, but you're going to run rather hot. The missile launcher is replaced with an MML-9, so you get a combination of SRM and LRM on it. Artemis 4 guidance, which is okay on a missile launcher this size. All the ammo is protected by Case 2 to make sure that you don't blow up when it goes. And the Gauss rifle, well, would have been way too heavy if it was using a standard Inner Sphere technology. So this one here has been replaced with an LB-10X, which is actually very good at taking down aircrafts, which goes with the targeting computer being used in the whole thing. It's not the best 70-ton machine out there, but it's going to do what it's meant to do, and it's going to do it fairly well. So I'm actually interested in seeing where this one goes. It does have a fairly high production cost of about 15 million C-bill, but then again, if you're a military outfit, it's not that high. Let's see what the people and the Rafeelia Republic do with this one. The follow-up work to the people at Totem Battleworks was to basically take the Grizzly and make it do different things. It was the basis for their newer designs, which were both Omnimex. The first one is the Rime Otter at 55 ton. It's a medium Omnimech in the same line as your 275 Mafia, using a rebranded 275 XL from Rough'em. 18.5 tons of pod space, built-in mask, reinforced structures, 9.5 tons of ferrofibrous plate. It's a really tough little trooper. We'll probably get to talk about it later. Next up was something much bigger with the Mastadon at 95 tons. It's the same kind of deal. It's basically a Grizzly that's scaled up with a reinforced chassis and 15.5 tons of ferrofibrous skin, making it a really tough monster. It still has 45 tons of pod space, which gives you plenty of options for all sorts of fighting, and it's getting to be very, very popular. The Wrestle League Dominion and Clan Ghostbear now have a whole lot of Totem Mechs running around to replace the Grizzly, ranging from the very small Bear Cub to the massive Kodiak and even the Kodiak 2. Most of those, however, are all standard battle mechs and not omnimechs, just like the Grizzly, so you see that Clan Ghostbear has a bit of a fixation there. With those Gaito Grizzlies in production, we are bound to see more of those in various battlefields and battle groups, and it could teach people a few different things about the benefits of having a reinforced chassis rather than something fancier. The Grizzlies are very, very rare in my neck of the woods. I only really ever get them when Phi Galaxies send a few around for repairs and upgrades. But I would love to spend some more times on it, especially on some of those newer ones. So I hope you guys have a very nice rest of your day. I thank you for listening to me for so long, and I will see you guys later. Bye-bye.